Thanks for joining yet another day of our Open Branding Month with our live Q&As. Today we have Stuart, who you guys might know from the video, or maybe you've seen him at Rebels and Rulers before, but Stuart is the former president of Americas for Landor. He's a super nice guy, very, very experienced, very talented, and very humbling as well in his kindness. So welcome, Stuart. Thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be reunited with you.
It's been a hot minute. As you guys know, instead of obviously what we would have loved to do with the event, which is hosted here and host everyone from many countries in our homeland, instead what we've decided to do is to do these live Q&As every day. So it's all about branding, a little bit of a daily dose, I should say. And so I'm super excited to have Stuart here. I have a lot of questions for him, as always. I have my questions, but if you have questions along the way, definitely type them into the Q&A if you're on Zoom, or if you're on Facebook, then type them into the chat, and I'll make sure to filter in as many as I can throughout the conversation. If not, then it's, I guess, up to myself and Stuart to hopefully answer as many of your questions as we possibly can. So let's get started. I won't waste another minute. Some of you might know that today Nick Bailey was also supposed to be here. Unfortunately, he had an emergency, which, as we all know, happens. So I do apologize for that, but all good. With Stuart, I'm sure we're going to be more than fine.
He's vastly more handsome and more charming than I am. So unfortunately it's the loss of everyone who's with us. Nick, next time.
We'll be sure to pass along the message. Anyway, so your presentation at Rebels and Rulers was really about recruiting and managing the best creative teams, and you had so many. You had so many great points on how to do that, what the value of that is, how creatives should be treated, how they should work with each other, with other departments, etc. But obviously quite a bit has, or maybe not, but quite a bit has changed in terms of the context in which we're living now. So I'm just, and not just in the past year, but I think just in general, for many years, things have been moving at such a fast pace that I'm really wondering if your definition of the word creativity has it evolved over the years when it comes to its role in branding and in brand strategy?
I think that, I don't know that I would say, I guess evolved is a great word, because I think, especially coming in like I did, I came in through advertising. And by the way, I'm in New York City. I don't know where everyone is in various locations, but I've been in New York City stuck for the past however many. Anyway, I came into marketing in advertising, Big Madison Avenue ad agency, and their roles there were lanes, and you were in a creative lane or a media or strategy, or I was client service. And I think that over time, and frankly, what's kept me in the business is the fact that those lanes don't have to be, and in fact, shouldn't be so defined and siloed, I guess.
Yeah.
What I love is that, and speaking about creativity, is that really everyone has to demonstrate the ability to be a creative thinker within the business that we're in. Just like everyone needs to be strategic, but obviously we're focusing on creativity side of things. So everyone needs to be creative. That said, and I always make this point, and this is just like a managerial point of mine, leadership point, is that it's not a democracy. So while I say everyone needs to be creative and look for ways to contribute, we've got experts. We've got experts in the field, and those are the creatives. Yeah. And that's why the presentation I gave last year around how to recruit and retain, I feel really strongly about, because this is a group within agencies or creative groups within client groups. Creatives are really critical in terms of what they contribute. So there are different ways to think about creatives and creativity. So I guess, like I say, in some ways, my thought has expanded because I think that everyone needs to be creative, but I also have just spent years trying to understand how best to help and nurture and grow those people who have creative in their title.
Okay, so given that concept of, everyone needing to be somewhat of a creative thinker, then what is the role of an actual creative and what is it not? And maybe in your experience you've seen them, kind of blurred to a certain extent, but I'm hoping that perhaps you can identify some of those moments more
Yeah.
explicitly.
So, I mean, what's the role? I mean, and again, I mean, at its core, the creative, the creative talent within the organization um, come up with the ideas basically, and also figure out how to develop and bring the ideas to life.
Hmm.
And again, that's not exclusively their domain, and I'm not an advocate. Well, I talked about last year the importance of them sitting together, because I do think
Yeah.
that there's sort of a nurturing that goes on, and a building on ideas, and we'll definitely come back to that as it relates to COVID, obviously, because that's the ability of creatives to get together, to be together physically, has been challenged. But while I while I have all, the ideas can come from anywhere, but it's the creatives who oftentimes initiate the ideas based on inputs and feedback they've been given, and then they bring those ideas to life. Not necessarily activate them, but they're responsible for taking the seeds of an idea and for lack of a better analogy, turning it into plants. um, yeah, so I guess, I mean, but again, I creatives need to be strategic, and creatives need to think about the client's business from a business standpoint. So that getting back to the theme of sort of the blurring that goes on, and that's why, frankly, the best creatives aren't necessarily limited to the people who come up with a great idea, but it has to be a great idea that works. It has to
Hmm.
be it has to be a great idea that can be executed with all the constraints that exist. It's not just pure, because frankly, and this is, I mean, creatives aren't artists, and sometimes I've worked with creatives over the years, and it's like, you might make a career change, and maybe you should become an artist, because you're wildly creative and you've got lots of great ideas, but you just don't seem to be capable or willing to funnel that creativity into the business,
Yeah.
the business needs we have. So that's, I mean,
Hmm.
that's sort of an interesting aspect of the creatives we need in business.
I think that it's similar to maybe the concept of blending creativity with data as well, in the sense that I'm wondering is it the creative's job then to kind of inform him or herself about, what's going on in the context of the great idea that they're trying to generate, or is it necessary that all of that comes in the brief to a certain extent? The
Yeah,
business, what it's about, the data behind it, et cetera, et cetera.
well, and I think, I think there needs to be formalized process, and as it relates to creative, a process that gives them what they need to germinate and come up with great ideas. But at the end of the day, the great creatives of the world are the ones that are innately curious, innately resourceful. Like I say, are strategic, care about the client's business, or the business challenge at hand. Um, Again, it's just not people who are just wildly creative for the sake of being creative.
So then you don't necessarily, so I mean, it sounds like you don't necessarily believe that them being strategic or thinking in the context of things is necessarily hindering their ability to generate out of the box ideas in any way. I
No,
mean,
I
some
mean,
people would argue that you would have to give creatives artistic license to a certain extent for them to truly, hone in on their craft. But perhaps that's not the case. I'm just playing devil's advocate, to be
yeah,
completely
yeah.
honest.
No, and I love it. But no, in fact, what I would say, the something that I've really respected is, and if you're lucky enough to work in an organization that's still doing creative briefs, and it's amazing to me, but a lot have sort of abandoned them, and I think that's a big mistake. But
Hmm.
at least the briefing, whether it's a physical brief or at least a briefing process, what I've really respected is that at those points, I've seen creatives push back and say, "You're not giving me anything. Like, what, tell me more about the business, tell me more about
Hmm.
the challenge, tell me more about, what the competitors are doing. So yeah, it's not, I mean, creativity needs to be informed and fed. And every great creative I know, would say that.
Hmm. So then, should they be coming in earlier in the process than has generally been done thus far? Or does this briefing process back and forth, them asking questions, is it working just fine?
It's not, I mean, it's
Should
not a
they be
linear.
in the room? I'm wondering if they should be, in the room during certain meetings, even if they're earlier on, or if that's just not necessarily a
Yeah,
good.
I think we're all over meeting, and that's that's largely only more
Side
true.
note, everybody tried to have less meetings. Stuart
Um,
says.
yeah, really. No, but case in point, why the hour meeting should be half an hour and a half an hour meeting should be 15 minutes. I mean, that's such an easy way to, I think, to bring greater productivity and
True.
sanity, frankly, to what we do. But back to the question at hand. I mean, I don't want to waste anyone's time.
Hmm.
So I'm not a fan of inviting people to meetings if there's really no reason for them to be there. But again, I am always really pleased when a creative wants to hear directly from the client.
Hmm.
Problem is not wait for the account person or client service person to take the briefing from the client, you know, cull it down and then pass it on. Or I'll tell you another in my career. One of the most gratifying moments was we were reorganizing where people were going to sit, and the creatives were going to sit together, which again I'm a big fan of. But the executive creative officer said, "And I want the strategists next to slash among us." And I was like, Eureka, because there was an acknowledgement on the part of the executive creative director and the creative team at this particular agency of the value of strategy, the strategy team, and the need for ongoing dialogue. Again, it wasn't
Hmm.
about give us the brief and go away. It was like we're going to be generating ideas, and we want people who really understand the consumer and really understand the client in close proximity, so we can call them over and say, hey, do you think this is going to work, or why don't you think this is
Yeah.
going to work? And not wait for 3 weeks from now when the ideas have been sort of half baked.
Yeah.
So that to me, that's part of, again, it's not silos, it's not discretely defined roles. It's all about collaboration.
So then is it important for somebody on the client services side to have had some kind of role or background as a creative in order to be able to interact better, or maybe not a requirement, but a benefit in some cases?
Um, I just think, I mean, I have my long list of what I think the good qualities of a client service person are. And again, it is strategic, it is creative, it is resourceful, it is problem solving, it's attention to detail. And again, that's probably another discussion. But I'm also, I don't, again, I'm just to be clear, I'm not advocating for a client service person to push a creative away from their screen and get in there and start.
Hmm.
So I think client service people should have opinions. Everyone should have opinions. Should offer up suggestions if they're founded and grounded in something. But let's not forget. I mean, it's the creatives who are responsible for the ideas.
Yeah, and I like that in your, I mean, in your presentation, you were giving so much credit to the creatives, really, and your analogy to a sports team, yes, the coach is one thing, but it's the athletes that get paid the most. I mean,
Absolutely.
it was such a great analogy, because I've heard so many times of creatives feeling very, very misunderstood, very misunderstood. That's why I was asking about the client services guys, because very misunderstood by the client services, by the demands, by the processes internally, by the, and so we say that, we draw a line between creatives and artists, sure, but they do feel like as artists, maybe they're not represented or taken into consideration or understood as well as they'd like. And so,
And they're putting it out there. They're putting it out there in a way that no one else, and I'll talk exclusively for an agency, but it applies more broadly. They're putting it out there more than anyone within an agency environment. I mean,
true,
they're putting out something that they think is meaningful, something that they have thought about and crafted,
true.
and people, both internally at the agency and certainly clients will just, dismiss it. And so, it takes a strong resiliency
Yeah, I
to
can
be
imagine.
creative and to keep coming back with ideas, even though you know that, most of them are going to get shot down.
Yeah. Complicated stuff. So you mentioned them having to sit together, and now we've gotten to the topic that is just you can't avoid it. But given what has happened during the last few months, what has changed about creative management, given the fact that they can't necessarily be together, neither can their leaders. So I think
Yeah.
I'd love.
Yeah. So I guess I'll take it beyond the realm of just creative management and just
Sure,
sort of the experience. And
sure.
I don't know if you remember, but when I gave my presentation last year, I said, this isn't just the ideas around hiring and retaining great creative. These aren't just the ideas of some old privileged white guy, but in crafting that presentation last year, I spent some quality time with creative leads that I've
Uh-huh.
worked with over the years and really respected. And similarly, in terms of preparing for today's discussion, I reached out. I definitely have my own observations. I have my own experiences, but I reached out to a handful of senior creative people working at a variety of agencies.
Oh,
Um,
great.
yeah, just to make sure I understood what their experiences were. So I guess what I'm going to share with you now is partially my observations, but I think more importantly, it's the observations of creative leads at some of the top agencies
Okay, I love
around
that.
the world. Yeah, well, like I said, I've had so
Always
much
so prepared, Stuart.
no, but I've had so much pleasure and joy and success in partnering with creatives
Hmm.
that to me it's again, I have my own ideas, but I wouldn't go forward with my ideas without validating them or learning more from talking to others. So
Okay.
I think so. So one of the things that is definitely lost in today's world as we collaborate like this. One of the creatives I spoke with used the word serendipity is lost, and I love that word. It's kind of an old
Yeah.
fashioned, but it speaks to sort of the magic that happens in this case, the magic that happens when people are physically together.
Hmm.
And he likened it to, and this was Nick Bailey, by the way, the guy who's
Ah,
supposed to be with us today.
okay.
I was like, well, if you're not going to be with us, then I'm going to pick your brain.
Very nice.
Um,
I like it.
and he said it's like he said a well functioning creative team is like a band, like
Hmm.
musical band. And he said, and like some of the best, most productive moments come, when a band is just jamming together, or just in a
Yeah.
room together, or late at night together, or eating and drinking together, where they're just doing what they love, which in the case of a band is playing music, elevated to this conversation or adjusted for this conversation, creatives thinking about solving problems creatively. So much of the great ideas come from just being in a room together and building off each other. There's like an
Yeah.
energy. There's an energy, and it's true of all collaboration. So that's missing. Um, Someone else was saying, like, it's like you lose you inherently, and I can talk. I mean, there are certain softwares that are in certain ways like Zoom that are helping us be together, but I mean, we certainly don't have all five senses. um, Not that smell would necessarily be the most important sense when it comes to collaborating, but nonetheless, you still like the what the magic of being in the same room and feeling and sensing and seeing is lost. And some another creative pal of mine was talking about, just the simple, pinning stuff up on a wall and being able to react to it. Sure,
Mm-hmm.
sure, there's things like Miro was talked about as being a real lifesaver, but it's still doesn't give you the same opportunities to riff and build as you have when you're in a room together.
Yeah.
So that was, we are still collaborating, and thank God for Zoom, and I think that Slack has been, Slack was offered up as another tool that was helpful. I think all the Google solutions have certainly helped, but people are definitely feeling the pain and challenges of not being able to be in a room together. I think there are some surprising positives, though.
Mm-hmm. Please.
And
I'm all for the optimism in situations like these, please.
So I would argue that there's actually been, and it's so counterintuitive, there's actually been a heightened sense of intimacy on some levels brought about by Zooming. I mean, I now have met my colleagues' kids because they wander in. I've now met my colleagues' spouses or partners.
Mm-hmm.
And, except for holiday parties, and lately most holiday parties didn't include partners anymore, that you really never got to see the other side of people you worked with. And now we do have, at least, albeit relatively small, we do have a window. Like, I can see that shelf behind you, and I can see these odd curios you have on the shelf, and I'm thinking, what do those mean? But it's still, it's contributing to a level of intimacy and understanding. And again, it seems so counterintuitive, but it has opened a window for all of us to understand and know a little bit more about each other than we did when we just met at work and then separated. Obviously, we socialized outside the office, but we still didn't have that. So I think that has been interesting. And I also think I think that's a reinforcement, frankly, of teamwork and collaboration. And then the other thing is, I mean, this has revealed a vulnerability that we all are feeling. And I think, people are demonstrating the effects of that vulnerability in different ways. But I think, if you've got any empathy, even like the slightest amount of empathy, I think this experience has brought us teams, people together in some ways, in ways that they weren't so previously. So and again, this is largely me, but not exclusively me in terms of the research I did for this. So I think that's actually been been a positive. So somehow, if you can weigh the pros and cons, and frankly, here we are. There's nothing we can do about it.
Yeah, but frankly, you should weigh the pros and cons. I'm with you on that one for sure. And I have to say that there are, at least for us as a team, I mean, to be honest, I don't think I was ever so much part of, I don't know, some of our creatives processes as I am now. And some of the relationships that I have with people that I work with for quite a while have, even though we're a small team, they've grown exponentially, or with clients, or with, I mean, really, because you're always on to a certain extent. So you jump into things. And so then you might catch me, I don't know, if there's an emergency, you might catch me when I just woke up. Okay, fine. Hashtag I woke up like this. Or I don't know, maybe you catch me like right after I walked out of the shower and something's going on and they're like, hey, do you have 2 minutes? And it has become so much easier, to be honest, to just create this fluid back and forth feedback loop that isn't tied to a certain time that we spend in the office, but rather is like, we give each other space. And then when we need something, we come together for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, we solve it, we go back. And it's just this constant, and in order to do that, you have to have that flexibility. You have to reach a certain level of comfort. And so then that intimacy that you're talking about plays a key role, because then you have to be comfortable kind of jumping in at any point, with kids, with whatever you're doing. You're having a sandwich, you're, I don't know, working out on a mat, and you're like, okay, yeah, hold on, give me 5 minutes. So I think I definitely agree with you. I'm wondering though how you've seen maybe other organizations overcome this current situation. You know, I understand that tools are useful, but any kinds of, I don't know, initiatives when it comes to engagement or keeping people together that you really like to see, or
I don't know. I mean, unfortunately, the list of challenges is greater than the list of solutions or positives.
yeah.
I think we're just cobbling through it. I think one of the big challenges with relying on platforms like Zoom is just the logistics, the logistics of getting everyone together at a given time when they're available. Which when we were all physically together was easier to overcome.
Yeah.
Um, so, and some of the other challenges. In my presentation last year, I talked about the importance of bringing in new, fresh thinking and bringing in, and I made a point of saying, even I know sometimes that's a little un-PC to, and I'm not saying get rid of the old people, but what I am doing is definitely emphasizing the value of bringing in young people. And it's been interesting during these times um, to think about how that strategy has been challenged. So, it's again, I'm a huge advocate. Bring in fresh, bring in interns, bring in people fresh out of school. Well, that works particularly well if those people can be mentored and supervised because they don't, they're not used to working in this kind of
Yeah.
in any kind of a formal like works environment. So suddenly that's a challenge because mentoring and supervising and teaching is not facilitated, is not facilitated by Zoom. You can try, but that's definitely one of and the ability of there's so many times I've seen it's been the intern or the person who's been there for less than a year who comes up with that idea, which is the spark for something amazing. And again, via Zoom, I think people are a little bit more reticent to throw in ideas. I think they hold back, especially if they're young and inexperienced. So to me, that's a huge drawback of this. And I guess on a related point is, thank God hiring has continued. I mean, unfortunately, there's been firing during COVID, but thank God there's also been hiring. But all sorts of challenges there because, I mean, someone's ability to really evaluate someone and their ability to fit in with a team is now, exclusively limited to how well they perform in front of a video camera. And then when you bring in a person and, we go to the opposite end of the spectrum, you bring in a senior person in the last couple of months, their ability to hit the ground running, build trust, share their thinking, their experience, all that is significantly challenged. Again, by not being in a room where interpersonal relationships can grow and develop, trust can be manifested. I think on the hiring side,
It's quite rough.
some real challenges. A positive, because I gave this was specific. I gave a specific question to a friend of mine, a senior creative, and I said, we're all Zooming now with people. Doesn't matter where they are. Assuming we return to a world where we're sitting in offices together, which I'm a believer that we will ultimately, and I think we'll get back. Some people disagree, but I think we'll get back to a time when most of the time we'll spend together in physical proximity. So the question I posed was, if you found an amazing creative talent, actually this was Nick Bailey again. So Nick Bailey's in Amsterdam. I said, okay, Nick.
We're speaking for Nick since he couldn't be here. We're making sure that we represent him well.
I said, okay, Nick, you're in Amsterdam. if you found an amazing creative director who was in Mexico City
Mm-hmm.
and she could not move to Amsterdam,
Mm-hmm.
and we're in the future now, a couple months. So I said, would you now, based on this experience of living through COVID and making it work remotely, if you found a great creative talent in Mexico City who could never, rarely come to Amsterdam, would you hire her? And he said, this experience has proven itself enough that, yeah, I would do that. I now feel comfortable hiring someone who effectively will never sit in the same room with the rest of my creative team. If I think that, in this case, this female creative director is a great addition to the team. And I thought that was really a cool development.
Yeah, that's great to hear. That was one of the things I wanted to ask. I'm so glad you asked him.
Yeah, it's like it's not the ideal, but this proves it can work. Um, so that will change things. So again, I'm hopeful. I can't wait till we can all be sitting and collaborating in rooms together. But the community of collaboration, I think, will moving forward will be able to be much broader.
Hmm.
Um, so that I think that's amazing because there's there's pockets of creativity that I mean, Mexico City, God, unbelievable
Yes.
creativity in Mexico City. Argentina, those are, and I don't want to diss anywhere else because I know there are pockets everywhere. But my personal experience, there's brilliance on the creative in terms of creativity in those two places, and historically the ability to get people and try to relocate them, and I mean there were so many challenges, but I think we've now proven that we can work together in an effective way and not necessarily have to have people
Hmm.
move. So
You
that's a
know,
that's a huge positive.
no, I'm happy to hear it because I also think that it's, before it was all about, oh, we have to build an office there, we have to build an office there, just to tap into some of these really great, let's say, more nascent communities. And I think I've heard similar stories from others as well. So I'm glad to hear that there's this trend of at least some higher degree of openness to bringing in folks from around the world. I mean, for representing a country like Romania, for me, that's a big deal, because I know that there are so many people here that maybe are not as inclined as some of previous generations to leave the country in order for better opportunities. So if this unfortunate year has brought them at least a certain level of, open doors around the world, I love to hear that, so that they don't necessarily have to leave, the place that they love so much. So for me, it's a very uh,
Mm-hmm.
personal joy to hear that this is what's happening. But I was going to ask you, I'm glad you brought up the young versus not so young um, contradiction, because I really was wondering if this whole experience that we've gone through has changed, let's say, the value of experience in the industry, and whether it started tipping in a different direction. Because I know, like you mentioned yourself, you were very adamant, let's say, a little bit about one more than the other last year. And I was going to ask you if that opinion has changed, just because, like you were saying, people that have experience, they might be able to jump in maybe a little bit better. I don't know. It might just be that it's
Yeah,
difficult to say.
yeah. I mean, unfortunately, I think my observation and feedback I've received suggests that the current environment has maybe depressed a little bit the value that I've always seen that the young and new and fresh can contribute. So I think this environment has depressed that a little bit. And again, understanding how to help those people feel comfortable contributing and then take their ideas and grow with them. All that has been challenged a little bit, and that's an unfortunate byproduct.
Hmm. So if we go back to for a second to what we were talking about with creatives and their dependency on briefs, I'm still thinking that now, if I sit here and think about how much more in isolation they're working, as compared to before, I'm wondering if they're so dependent on the information that they're given and on their ability to kind of pull that information from others, client services, strategy, etc. Then how do you isolate creative work in order to say, yes, this is what was done, this was the quality of that execution, and this is how I'm going to determine any kind of, let's say, additional compensation or something like this? How do you look at creative work in isolation when it's so interdependent on everything else that they're provided?
Maybe let's come back to, I guess we come back to the sports analogy.
Yeah, sure.
Well, no, I just think, there's you have the success of the team, but you still have the ability, we'll choose basketball, a sport of which I know nothing. I mean, you have the teams, the team wins or loses and it has the record it has, but you can certainly parse the contribution that individuals are making. And I guess I've never, I guess there's some people who fake it, but I don't know. I don't think I've ever had trouble parsing the contribution. And I don't mean just me. I don't think people have had trouble parsing the contribution that people truly make. And that's just part of, being managers. And so, yeah, I mean, to me, that's not a huge.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Look, Matt is writing to you on Facebook. Doesn't this new world make hiring talent from around the world more sensible? And he says, but I guess this was already answered. Anyways, it's good that Matt, speaking of Matt, because actually the next question I wanted to ask you is if you could tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing with Matt. And for those of you guys that don't know, Stuart and Matt Beispiel, who we talked to, I think last week, I'm losing a sense of time with all the lives every day, but I believe it was last week. They started working together recently, and I'm wondering what was the need that kind of started all of this? And what are you guys actually doing?
Sure. So Matt Beispiel is, look him up on LinkedIn. He's a great guy. He has an amazing track record. Where I first met him, he was working in the marketing group, leading advertising and branding at Visa. And then so I worked with him there, and then he went to McDonald's and had a really important global role there. And so he was not only a great client, but he became a friend. And actually, he introduced me to you. So that's how I was, because he went 2 years ago, I guess, joined you guys.
Yeah.
But anyway, so he got off the treadmill a couple of years ago and started MB Brand Consulting. And he and I partnered together. And it's been interesting because I got off the treadmill last year. It's been interesting, especially during these times of COVID, cracks or challenges we're largely focusing right now within marketing groups, marketing organizations within clients. Mm-hmm. And so cracks or challenges with how they worked and got things done have become much more impactful. So the things that weren't quite working right are now really causing issues. And so Matt brings a really deep client side experience, and I bring really deep agency side experience in marketing. So we've been working with, most recently, we've been working with clients who are dealing with many of the challenges we just discussed, the creatives are facing. Marketing groups within clients are facing challenges. And so we've been, we've partnered with a couple just to help them think through where those challenges exist and what they need to do to overcome them. So, sharing, for example, examples are helpful. Working with a marketing group that is, under incredible pressure to innovate because these are trying times and there's all sorts of things that are changing that require a good, any company to be agile and evolve. So this marketing group is under intense pressure to innovate, but they were finding that they weren't bringing enough creativity to to the process of innovating, and frankly, it just seemed to be a little bit of a logjam in terms of. So Matt and I led a workshop for them. Matt shared some basic principles of creativity as it relates to innovation, and I shared a framework because I think it's pretty basic. I'll share now so you guys just get a sense of it. So basically, 3 Ps. One was just making sure that if you're called upon to be innovative and come up with some creative, innovative thinking. So 3 Ps. First one is just make sure you have the right people. Mm-hmm. So diverse group. Make sure everyone's in it, understanding they need to actively participate, different points of view. So that was just a pretty basic one. The second P was precision of strategy and basically what you're doing. Make sure everyone understands what they're there for. Mm-hmm. So because sometimes it gets lost, and then you need clear strategic underpinnings. So the P is precision of. So what's the objective? What's the overarching objective? What are the strategies that have been identified to deliver on that objective?
Yeah. And
then, okay, now we're going to come up with the ideas that will bring that strategies to life that'll deliver on those objectives. But it's just really, it's just nailing that sort of fundamental outlook. And then the last was just process and just really ensuring that there's an understood process. One of the things that we're huge advocates for is making sure that there's a shared language of when you're coming up with ideas and brainstorming and evaluating ideas. It's very helpful if people know how to talk about those ideas, how to grade those ideas.
Yeah.
So we've got grading systems that we share. So anyway, we are finding that people are looking outside to consultants like Matt and myself, NB Brand Consulting, to come in and help them shore up, because that's what it basically is. It's shoring up things that aren't working under the stress of COVID, which I have to say, again, our experience limited, but many budgets have been cut. Timing, if anything, has only been sped up, which God would have believed that things could be sped up even more quickly. But clients' needs have only been sped up, and then everyone's feeling the pain of trying to effectively collaborate and get stuff done remotely.
So are these the general challenges that you see, or are there others more specific client side that that you've observed, things that you've observed client side during these challenging times?
Well, actually, so one thing related. This is not answering your question. I'll be upfront about that. But it's related.
The floor is yours. I'm just here to.
Yeah, we just went through the political process where politicians were not answering any of the questions that were being asked. They were just saying what they wanted.
So we're right on trend, Stuart.
Exactly. No, but one thing I did want to point out, which is many of the challenges that were described before about a team's ability to cohese.
Yes.
During this, also has revealed itself in terms of agencies' ability to cohese with clients.
Good point.
So, trust is so fundamental to the relationship between agencies and clients.
Yeah.
And trust, oftentimes is built on sitting in a room together, going drinking, just being in physical presence, one from the other.
Yeah.
And so that, we don't have the opportunity to do that. So we're all trying to figure out ways, agencies are trying to figure out ways to build relationships with their clients, with their client partners. and that's also being challenged.
Okay. You said an interesting thing during your presentation, and I think I'm going to I might just end with that so I can see if you still have the same opinion. But do you consider that creatives still rule the agency?
Did I say that?
You did.
No, I don't think they rule the agency.
This is what happens. This is what happens when people when you're filmed.
I have to go watch the tape. You know what I did say was, I think people have to be prepared and accept the fact that creatives will likely be the highest paid within an agency. And maybe I really will go back and play the tape, because I mean, I think that's a fact, and I think that's I have no problem with that, because I think at the end of the day, if you don't have new breakthrough effective ideas, then as an agency, I don't know what you have.
That's what I was assuming as well when you made the point. So
yeah, but I guess where I recoil a little bit is when you say that I said that they rule the roost, because it's a team, and I have lived through very dysfunctional agency experiences where there was a pecking order, a very obvious pecking order.
Yeah.
It doesn't serve anyone well. I mean,
yeah.
it's so I think their role is critical, but I think strategy is critical. I think if you don't have good client service people, if you don't have good finance, frankly, if you don't have a good finance department, you're really screwed. So, so yeah, believe me, I'm in awe of creatives. I love getting to work with creatives. So yeah,
it's pretty neat to see how their minds function sometimes. That's what I was saying earlier, that to be there in real time, it's way more collaborative, I think, for me than it was before. And it's nice to see how they work. But we do have another question actually from somebody. They're asking, so do you think this year had less changes in terms of pitches, or changing, like to change the agency the brand works with? Do you think people were a bit more stable? They stuck more together rather than looking to switch? Or
this is I don't pretend to have an informed point of view. I haven't read anything. I haven't read anything. I don't feel like I have enough experience to make a generalization. My sense is that people have pretty much sat tight with, the clients have sat tight with the agencies they had, because this is not a great time to go through a pitch process. And I would like to say teams remained intact, but as we all know, the reality is that because of budgets getting cut, a lot of our colleagues, friends and colleagues have lost their jobs. So yeah. It's been a really difficult, challenging time. The good news is I also, as many people as I know who have lost their jobs, I also know other people who have found jobs that they're excited about.
Yeah.
So it hasn't been one way in that regard. But it's definitely been tumultuous. And I don't pretend to have broad knowledge, but I certainly would counsel against firing your agency right now and going through a pitch,
But even the concept of a pitch process must be incredibly intriguing at this point, no? Because you can't walk in there. I mean, I'm sitting there thinking, from what I know, let's say I think maybe from our experience, either one of us, it matters the way you walk into a room. It matters the way people feel when they meet you. It matters. These things matter when you're sitting there fighting, friendly fighting with other agencies or other potential partners for that spot. And so even that must have changed immensely.
Yeah, I don't, like I say,
Interesting
I'm
concept.
trying to even think what I've read in the press. I haven't, I, I can't immediately think of any major.
No, it's okay. I don't think we necessarily need examples, but definitely something for everyone to consider if they're part of this business. I don't know if anybody ever wants to come back and tell me what they think, but I'm so curious now that Andrea has mentioned it. I'm so curious as to how that's changed. But that being said, this was great as always. You're the creative creative mastermind sometimes, really.
It's all based on respect, observation, and incredible dependence.
And
I,
asking the right questions. I mean, really, you're I love that you always go and talk to others and you come with opinions other than your own. And I mean, it shows a lot about the character, to be honest, when you go and do something like that. So I really appreciate that extra point of view. You did it the same during your presentation, and we talked about it then as well. And I'm glad to hear that you did it again this time. But most of all, I thank you for your time, really.
well, I really, really respect and appreciate what you guys are doing, and look forward to a time when we can be back in person together and having great sessions like we did last year, and I know you've had in years past. So so grateful, and really I'm impressed that you guys have pushed forward with as an aggressive an initiative as this, because it takes so much.
Thanks.
I know how hard you work, and at least I think I do, but you probably work 10 times harder. So thanks for pulling this together. It's really great to keep people talking and thinking, and hopefully moving in the right direction.
Oh, you're too kind, Stuart. Thank you so much again. And for everyone that joined, thank you for yet another great day. Like I say every time, I think the engagement with this has been, especially on the site as well, has been just surprising in a good way, to say the least. So talk about global global opportunities given what has gone on. We've definitely branched out a bit beyond our borders, but yeah, thank you to everyone for joining. Tomorrow we take a break actually from lives, to be honest, and we come back on Thursday. So for anybody that's watching, just keep that in mind. And otherwise, look out for the videos. Connect with Stuart on LinkedIn. He's there. He's super open. I'm sure he'd love to talk to any of you.
Please do.
As you can see, he's super interested in getting as much input as he can. So I thank you, Stuart. I thank everyone. I wish everybody a great day, and I'll see you soon. Bye.